Today we have a special event dedicated to the commemoration of the events of January 20th, also known as Black January. For those who are watching this live and who are not familiar with what happened, this is a commemoration of the Soviet-backed invasion of Baku when the Soviet Union sent in 26,000 troops, and they opened a live fire that happened in January 1990. Many people were killed, and they killed indiscriminately Muslims, Christians, Jews, whoever was there. And following the massacre, they imposed a curfew that was supposed to pacify the population and keep it from responding to this atrocity. However, that's not what happened. Instead, Azerbaijanis essentially marked this occasion for 40 days, and they united in a peaceful response to this. A year later, following these events, Azerbaijan gained its independence from the Soviet Union. This was not the first time that the Soviets have imposed their will by force on populations that they attempted to control. This was also a way to prevent Azerbaijan from moving in the direction of independence. It not only did not work, but actually inspired Azerbaijanis to resist what became very clear had been a very violent and miserable occupation from the moment the Soviet Union had imposed itself. And as a result, other countries as well eventually took to resist the Soviet imposition of its power. And eventually the Soviet Union fell apart, broke apart completely, and all of their republics gained independence. However, sadly, a lot of the people who partook in those atrocities were never held accountable by the Soviet Union. And as we see today, some of the adherents of the same ideology have imposed themselves in other areas and have tried to resurrect the same geopolitical position of imposing their presence by force. We've seen that in Georgia, we've seen that in Ukraine, in Moldova. For that reason, commemorating something like that is not just about remembering the past and giving comfort to the families of people who were killed or to the survivors, or essentially it's not just a feel-good gesture, but it's also an important historical lesson to remember, to understand what's happening today, to understand where some of the current positions are coming from, why some people are concerned about current issues that were never completely resolved, and why the path to peace, to security in Caucasus, it's a path that's been hard, that involved a lot of hard work politically, as well as militarily, and it still continues. It continues and should not be taken for granted. And with that, I actually want to start off with a moment of silence in memory of the people who had suffered as a result of this atrocity. Thank you. So today we will mark this occasion with a number of interesting speakers. Um, this event is part of the Caucasus Journalist Network series that has kicked off in November. In the past, we discussed geopolitics of the region, energy issues, and other things. And of course, in the future, we will have many other events. I'd like to introduce briefly Benjamin Minnick, the founder of Timberwolf Phoenix, who is co-hosting this event. A lot of it is very hard work behind the scenes. And my name is Irina Zuckerman, for those who don't know me yet. We've been running some of the coverage concerning not just the war for the liberation of territories, but also events, just articles about Caucasus, about cultural, religious, economic issues on our website, Republic Underground. Today is an event that's more historical than political, but of course you can't easily separate the two. With that, I'd like to introduce you Leila Rustamova, who will give an overview and introduction to these events as a historian, as an expert in this area. Thank you so much.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely greet all participants of the event. We have gathered today for a very important issue. The date of January 20 is important in the history of our people. Those who committed it are the Soviet imperialists. Undoubtedly, it is first of all history of our heroism and struggle. And we remember our martyrs who created this history with great respect and esteem. The Soviet imperialists wanted to break the determination of the Azerbaijani people to independence. And this was the purpose of sending troops to Baku and various regions of the country. When we look at the political processes of that time, we must movement that began in January 20th, 1990, is the celebration of this movement. And it was a movement that created by the national forces. And the process of maturing these forces began in the 17th of the century. When the coming of our national leader Heydar Aliyev to power in Azerbaijan, uh, then led to a revival in all spheres of life, as well as had an exceptional role in the formation of national self-consciousness. And during his first leadership in Azerbaijan, he skillfully prepared the economical, political, and spiritual aspects of future independence. He took numerous measures in this direction. At that time, the Azerbaijani youth were provided with education in prestigious universities of the USSR. At the same time, examples of fiction that contradicted the ideological base of the Soviet imperialism had appeared. And Heydar Aliyev protected the authors of those literary works from the repression and persecutions of the time. And he created ample opportunities for their creativity. All these measures had an exceptional role in the formation of ideological base of the People's Liberation Movement of 1988, which eventually led to the history of January 20th. In the 1918s, a huge Soviet empire that had existed for more than 70 years was collapsing, and the reconstruction policy of the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, and other attempts failed and did not yield any results. And awakening movements in the Allied republics paved the way for the rapid collapse of the USSR. And during this period, centrifugal tendencies intensified since attempt the Soviet Empire at cost of fear tried to save the empire at cost of fear, massacre, and so on, failed, and the Soviet leadership secretly considered the factor that could provoke the national conflicts in various areas of the country, and tried to create bloody clashes between people. A few days after the national leader Heydar Aliyev resigned from the Politburo of the Central Committee of the Communist Party and from the post of first deputy chairman of the Council of Ministers of the USSR in October 1987. The aggression of the Armenian nationalists especially intensified. With the support of their patrons in Russia and abroad, they began to pursue an aggressive policy, making territorial claims against Nagorno-Karabakh autonomous region and the Nakhchivan autonomous republic, which are part of Azerbaijan. And at a rally held by the Karabakh Committee in Pushkin Square of Yerevan in October 1987, and in an interview with the advisor of Mikhail Gorbachev, Abel Aganbekyan, with the French newspaper Humanite on November 18th, 1987, the expediency of annexing Nagorno-Karabakh to Armenia was clearly stated. And it should be noted that in 1988 to 1991, 230,000 Azerbaijani Turks and inhabitants, they were inhabitants of 185 villages and settlements of Western Azerbaijan were expelled from their ancestral lands. And on November 9th, 1988, the construction work began at Tophana on a vacation resort for workers at Yerevan's Kanaker aluminium factory. And permission of the work for the work had been granted by the Askeran District Executive Committee. Tophana was a final drop that made the cup of patience overflow. And starting from November 17th, large-scale demonstrations began in Azadlık Square of Baku to protest the supposed destruction at Tophana. And on December 31st, as a protest to Moscow's biased position toward Azerbaijan and refusal to simplify the border regime, 137 kilometers of Soviet-Iranian borders from Ordubat to Sederek was destroyed. And on January 18th, 1990, in Bilasvar and Jalabad districts of Azerbaijan, border posts and other facilities population. And on January 19th, 1999, the extraordinary session of the Supreme Council of the Nakhchivan Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic adopted a resolution on the withdrawal of the Nakhchivan Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic from the USSR and the Declaration of Independence. On the same day, the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR declared a state of emergency in Baku without consent of the Supreme Soviet of Azerbaijan. However, until the morning of 1990, the decree was kept secret from the public. And the chairman of the Supreme Soviet of the USSR, Evgeny Primakov, and the secretary of the Central Committee, Girenko, assured Azerbaijani officials and the population that deployment of troops in Baku was out of the question. But on January 19th, 1990, at 1927, power units of the Azerbaijani television was blown out. And starting from 9 p.m., Soviet forces under the leadership of the USSR Defense Minister Dmitry Yazov entered Baku from different directions and destroying the barricades, firing unarmed inhabitants by heavy military vehicles and various types of weapons. People were shot with special brutality and at close range. Hospitals, the ambulances came under fire, doctors were killed, and people were killed with bayonet knives. 5.45 caliber bullets of the Kalashnikov rifle with variable center of gravity was used. Minors, women, the elderly, and persons with disabilities were also among the dead. And despite the fact that 147 people were killed, 744 were injured, hundreds of homes were burned, and the population, the economy was severely damaged. The Azerbaijani people were not discouraged, and 40-day national strike was declared in Azerbaijan to protest this bloody tragedy. And immediately after this tragedy, our national right leader, Heydar Aliyev, visited the office of the Azerbaijan's permanent representation in Moscow with his family members. He expressed his solidarity with his people, sharply condemned the Soviet leadership for committing this bloody tragedy, and exposed those who led the operation. And at a session of Milli Majlis of the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic, Heydar Aliyev described the January tragedy as an as an assault on the Azerbaijani people's sovereign rights. Being a basis for nationwide mourning, the January tragedy also demonstrated the firmness of the Azerbaijani people's will and determination, and moved by the Soviet army's cruelty and the consequent imposition of a curfew in Baku, the people of Azerbaijan staged a massive rally in Azadlık Square of Baku on January 21st, 2nd, to pay tribute to the martyrs of January 20th. The burial ceremony at the Alley of Martyrs was attended by nearly 2 million people. The first political recognition of the January 20th tragedy came on March 29th, 1994, when Azerbaijan's legislative body, Milli Meclis, adopted the relevant resolution on the initiative of our national leader, Heydar Aliyev. And on August 5th, 1998, President Heydar Aliyev issued an order to erect an eternal flame monument in the Alley of Martyrs. In January 2010, a memorial for Black January victims was erected by the order of the President Ilham Aliyev. The opening of the monument took place on January 20th, 2010. President Ilham Aliyev and families of victims of the tragedy attended the ceremony. On January 20th of each year, thousands of people visit the Alley of Martyrs to pay their tributes by laying flowers, say prayers for the victims of this tragedy. The People's Liberation Movement, launched in 1988, was also a protest of our people against the Armenian oppression in Nagorno-Karabakh. It was an oppression that aimed to tear away Karabakh from Azerbaijan. In fact, the events of January 20th was a terror of those who wanted to stifle this movement. But as you know, Karabakh is now free. Karabakh is Azerbaijan, and as a result of a 44-day war, thanks to the political will and military strategy of our Supreme Commander-in-Chief Ilham Aliyev and our strong army, our people have been reunited with their native lands. The integrity of our territory have been ensured. And we can say at such a point that souls of the martyrs of January 20th are happy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. That was extremely informative, very moving. And while you were talking, it brought me back my memories, because when I visited Azerbaijan in 2018, I got a chance to visit this location, Martyrs Lane, and actually see the very memorials you were talking about. So that kind of brought me, visually, it kind of gave me the context for the events as you were telling them about. I don't know whether it works better for you to take questions after everyone goes, or if you have to leave earlier. What works better for you?
I can't hear.
Oh, I was asking whether you would like to take questions now if you need to leave earlier, or otherwise after all the presentations finish.
Yes, after all the presentations. Uh-huh.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So with that, I give the floor to Dr. Frank Musmar, who has a presentation as well.
Hello. Okay. Well, I wrote a small paper about the subject, and I called it Azerbaijan from the pain of Black January to an international energy key player. On January 20th, 21st, Azerbaijanis commemorated Black January 31st anniversary, a bloody crackdown by Soviet troops that failed to stop Azerbaijan's independence movement. Despite the 31st year, the massacre still fresh in the heart of all Azerbaijanis. For the last 31st years, Azerbaijanis have been flocking to the Berterdam cemetery, showing their gratitude to those who burned the fire of independence with carnations, which have become the symbols of January 20 victims. Azerbaijan before the first independence. Azerbaijan took its name. Actually, this is like something new to me from the Persian language, means fire protector, which is from the rich deposits of natural gas and oil resting on the salt surface, causing the soil to be flammable around the Baku area. Beside oil, the country's climate diversity is another natural gift to grow an array of crops that range from tobacco to cotton to vegetables and citrus fruits to grains and grapes. The Azerbaijani people are indigenous Caucasians. However, they were subsumed into other cultures that clashed in the area, such as the Albanians, Romans, Persians, Arabs, and Turks over several centuries. Accordingly, the country has a combination of three major religions and several Persian and Turkish language dialects. The population of the Republic of Azerbaijan is approximately 7.5 million people. However, three times as many of Azerbaijanis, estimated 20 to 25 million, live in north of Iran. Russia wanted to maintain influence in the region against the Ottomans and Persians. Thus, from the early 1800s up to the 1828, conflicts broke out between Russia and Persia. By the 1828, the Russians came to dominate nearly all of the northern and southern Caucasus. Accordingly, in 1828, Russia and Persia signed the Turkmenkay Treaty to divide Azerbaijan. The territory of present-day Azerbaijan becomes part of the Russian Empire, while the southern Azerbaijan became part of Persia. In that treaty, by Article 4 of the treaty, Iran loses sovereignty over Yerevan, which is currently the capital of Armenia, Nakhchivan, Talish, Ordubad, and Mugan regions of Aran province, now part of modern Azerbaijan Republic, in addition to all lands annexed by Russia in the Gulistan Treaty. Sorry if I'm not saying the names correctly, but I'm not much familiar with those names, but maybe you guys more than me are familiar with it. The Aras River is assigned the new borderline between Iran and Russia from Ararat Galley to a river's outlet at Astara. In 1848, Azerbaijan's massive oil reserve were developed, and the world's first oil well was drilled south of Baku. In 1879, Western tycoons such as the Rothschilds and Nobles made Azerbaijan ground of their latest oil technologies. Baku became the terminus of the world's first oil pipeline, The Zoroaster was constructed as the world's first oil tanker to carry black gold from Azerbaijan rich wells. The first Trans-Caucasian Railroad was built in 1865 in Poti on the Black Sea and reached Baku in 1883. Later, the railroad became an essential route of transporting Baku's oil. Now I'm going to talk about Azerbaijan from the first independence to the second independence. After 1917, Caucasians were interested in two issues, work and land, but Russia was interested in Baku's oil only. Accordingly, the Russian Civil War started, and revolutions began in 1905 and lasted until 1918, ended with Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan became independent. However, Armenia and Azerbaijan immediately went to a war with each other over the disputed territory, including Karabakh and Nishivan. The war started because both lived under larger empires for centuries with no clear borders, mixed or united ethnic enclaves, or historical bases. The Soviets indeed invaded both countries in 1920 and brought them under Soviet control. The Azerbaijan Democratic Republic main achievement in Tbilisi on May 28, 1918 was creating the first parliamentary republic with 11 parties and factions in first parliament. There were two Armenian factions within the parliament. The second one, Azerbaijan gave parity to women to receive the right to vote in Baku before most European and American countries. Third, founding the first university in 1919 with four faculties: history, physics, math, law, and medicine. And the university first dean was the surgeon Vasily Razumovsky. The republic lasted for 23 months until April 28, 1920. The Red Army invaded Azerbaijan and occupied Baku's capital city. Azerbaijan was declared a Soviet Socialist Republic under the Soviets, and in 1922, Azerbaijan became a founder member of the Soviet Union. In 1936, the Transcaucasian Soviet Federative Republic dissolved. Azerbaijan became a full republic of the Soviet Union. Azerbaijan then lived under the domination of Soviet Union until 1991. That year, the Soviet Union collapsed, and Azerbaijan regained its independence as a Republic of Azerbaijan. Under the control of former Soviet Union from 1920 to 1991, religious worship was discouraged and most mosques and churches were destroyed. Today, Azerbaijan enjoy the freedom of religion. Muslims, Jews, and Christians can all worship openly and freely. In 1988, the Nagorno-Karabakh region sought to become part of Armenia. Ethnic Azeris began to leave Karabakh and Armenia, and ethnic Armenians leave Azerbaijan. This led to an escalation of ethnic strife between Armenia and Azerbaijan in 1990. Dozens died in inter-ethnic violence in Baku, and Soviet troops used force to end the unrest. In 1991, the Azerbaijani parliament voted to restore independence. In election in elections boycotted by the opposition, Mr. Mutalibibov became president and Haidar Aliyev became the leader of Nakhchivan's Azerbaijani exclamation. This will lead us to the Black January. In an attempt by Moscow to prevent the disintegration of the Soviet Union, on January 20, 1990, more than 200 people were killed after emergency rule was declared and Soviet soldiers fired into crowds of protesters in Baku. However, the crackdown only strengthened the local independence movement, and the following year, Azerbaijan became a sovereign state after 7 years of Soviet captivity. The massacre was named Black January in history. The massive demonstration that led by the Black Friday started in 1988 after the Armenians increased their activities to break off the Upper Karabakh area from Azerbaijan. The Supreme Council of Armenian Soviet Republic decided to annex Upper Karabakh to Armenia in 1989. Azerbaijan reacted to the decision with demonstrations held in Baku with hundreds of thousands of people. The Soviets deployed an army to Baku. The people blocked the city entrance roads and shut the front of military units in Baku. In January 1990, the Soviet army of 26,000 troops with armored vehicles entered Baku from five directions, shooting and killing 130 unarmed civilians. Tanks and heavily armored vehicles were driven over people while the fire was opened at ambulances and passengers' buses. On January 19, the Soviet army continued its massacre in other cities such as Neftchala and Lankaran in the southern part of the country, killing 147 Azerbaijani civilians, injuring 744 civilians, and detained 400 civilians in both incidents. The Black January massacre shocked the confidence of the Azerbaijani people in the Soviet administration, and the process leading to the country's independence began. Now we're going to talk about Azerbaijan after the second independence and it become an energy key player. Since its independence, Azerbaijan has undergone significant economic transformation, with its large oil and gas reserve pushing it to strong growth in the last 31 years. In 1994, Azerbaijan signed the contract of the century with a consortium of international oil companies to explore and exploit three offshore oil fields. In 1997, the first oil was produced by the Azerbaijani International Operating Company under the contract of the century. The year 2001 was a changing point in the history of the modern Azerbaijan. The country became a full member of the Council of Europe. The USA lifted the aid ban imposed during the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict with Azerbaijan, provides airspace and intelligence to the USA. Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Turkey reached an agreement on oil and gas pipeline linking Caspian fields with Turkey and shifted to the Latin alphabet of the for the Azeri language. In 2002, the construction work started on the multi-billion-dollar pipeline to carry Caspian oil from Azerbaijan to Turkey via Georgia. The pipeline Baku-Tbilisi Ceyhan formally opened in 2006. Accordingly, Azerbaijan State Oil Company used the excuse of the dispute over energy prices to stop pumping oil to Russia in 2007. In 2010, British Petroleum announced plans for gas pipeline from Azerbaijan to Europe, bypassing Russia. In 2014, British Petroleum started constructing the Southern Gas Corridor pipeline, which became an operational in 2018. Oil and gas account for more than 90% of Azerbaijan exports. The Azerbaijani government and international companies invested substantially in the energy sector, and the construction of the several new power plants and rehabilitation and modernization of the gas and electricity networks improve the reliability and security of supply. Such modernization helped the country to become the 24th largest crude oil producer in the world and the second among the European Union energy focused countries after Kazakhstan in 2018. According to the 2019 Azerbaijan energy profile, the country became a major crude oil producer, 37.5 million ton, including natural gas liquids, and a significant natural gas producer, 24.5 billion cubic meters. And because of this large hydrocarbon production, Azerbaijan has one of the highest energy self-efficiency ratio in the world. Its energy production is more than four times its energy demand. Moreover, Azerbaijan generates 26 terawatt hour of electricity annually, most from natural gas, which is more than 90% in 2019. The Seoul country refinery produces 5.8 million tons of oil products from domestic crude oil and natural gas liquids, and also significant exporter of crude oil, 30.8 million tons in 2019, and natural gas, 11 billion cubic meters in 2019. With this, I conclude, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, and please don't forget to also share the article with Rachel for publication. And with that, I give the floor to Maria, who's going to share some experiences from a survivor of those events.
Thank you very much. So as usual, I'm sharing with you guys the civil points of view of all these stories. So what I did is, well, since I was born in 1989, so in 1990, obviously I was too small to, thanks God, to be witnessing anything. Plus, my family lives in Ganja, which is to the western part of Azerbaijan, closer to Georgia and Armenia. So that is why my family was not directly witnessing the horrors of the Black January events. But what I did is I asked my mom just to share with me, like, what was her feelings, what was her experience, what did she hear about all those events. And while I was listening to her, I drafted a small paper that I will also share with you guys. So I will be just reading and commenting about this. So my question to my mom was, Mommy, how was it living in the Soviet Union? So here how she goes. We lived in the happiest country on the earth. Starts my mom her story about the events that preceded the Black January events. We won over the Hitler Nazis. Our army was glorious and indestructible. We were the happiest people. We had absolutely no unemployment. Also, we were told. Adds she sarcastically, of course. Well, the fact that the Soviet army did win over Hitler and Nazis, that goes without saying, but a second part of her sentence about us, about Soviet people being the happiest on the earth and having no unemployment and things were just super good, was obviously a lie. The situation was worsening in the late 90s in the Soviet Union. They witnessed the deficiency of food, the economy was collapsing, plus there were rumors that the USSR would engage in a war with the United States. And these rumors were kind of growing after Brezhnev died. So things were not too smooth in the late 90s. Then, she says, in 1985, Gorbachev comes to power. And shortly after his arrival, things started to worsen. First, they had this Chernobyl catastrophe in 1986. And as we know now, all the untold truth about this catastrophe, that things are just starting to be revealed now. And then the Karabakh conflict. So as I said, my family, they're from Ganja, and thankfully we were spared the tragic fate of the victims of 1990 in Baku, but they did witness, obviously, the tensions that preceded those events. For example, my mom says that she saw the waves of Azerbaijani refugees coming from Karabakh, coming from also being installed in Ganja. And it was not only until the second or the third wave that the Armenians in Ganja also started feeling kind of restless and started to flee the country. Mom recalls that all the Armenian friends that she knew in Ganja did not go to Armenia, but they were headed to Russia, namely to Krasnodar and to Stavropol regions. I asked her why, and that's what she told me. She said that they said, we don't want to go to Armenia. The Armenians, they don't like us there. They said that we were too Azeri for them. We did not speak Armenian the same way they spoke. We had our Azeri accent. So they did not simply like us. So that is why, from what my mom says, all the people that she knows in Ganja, no one went back to Armenia. Everyone went to Krasnodar and to Stavropol regions in Russia. And these Armenians, they were not too eager to leave Azerbaijan because life was good for them. And they did admit that. They did admit that they were really not willing to do so. And they were just doing so because they were scared. And obviously they would see all these people, all these Azerbaijanis fleeing in such horrible conditions from Armenia to Azerbaijan. So the events of the night of the 19th to 20 January 1990. As we know, the Soviet troops entered Baku in the dead of the night. The decision to invade it was made without informing the local government, and people found out about the extraordinary situation only hours after it started. Here is what my mom says about her story, how she heard about these events. So she had this friend that lived in Baku at that time, and my mom wanted to, actually she had to leave from Ganja to Russia because she needed to see a friend or something. And bad luck, her ticket was actually on the 20th of January from Baku. She had her flight Baku, Moscow or something. So she tries to call her friend just to inform her that she's leaving. Obviously, no one in Ganja is actually aware that things are happening in Baku. And there was no phones, television was cut because of the strategical hit of the Baku television tower at that time. So by some miracle, my mom found a way to contact my friend, her friend in Baku, and that's what she was telling her. Tanks are everywhere, and so many soldiers in black masks, in camouflage, just shooting randomly at people, wounding, killing them. We're afraid to approach our windows. We have to shut them tightly. We have to turn off the electricity, as they also shoot at the windows where they see the light. I had to cook the porridge for my baby practically lying on the floor in our kitchen so that they don't see us through the windows. We're so horrified. We do not understand what's happening. These were the words of her friends. So just imagine this common folks. For years, they've been told that their army protects them, that their police protects them. They've never seen anything like this black masked man in camouflage that we now see in all the movies and everything. So they never saw this kind of, this kind of events. And out of sudden, their army that was supposed to protect them, they see them turning their muzzles against the civilians. They see that Soviet troops enter the city just like it would, as an occupant would enter a city, and actually turning their muzzles of their tanks and their spikes of their bayonets against the civilians. So mom said that they would not even hear actually about what was happening because, as I said before, the television was cut. They caught some TV channel coming from Shusha that was trying to show some news. But as my mom says, they were very scarce. Like they would have an image for like 2 seconds and then it would just go away and then again, blackness. So they would just only hear rumors about what was going on that night in Baku. What can we say in conclusion to this? That these bloody pages were really the last tragic ones of the history of the Soviet Azerbaijan. The Soviet government on one side just turned a blind eye on the pre-history of this conflict, the Karabakh escalation, and on the other hand, the Soviet government just wanted to crush the uprising of the national independence movement, just like Mrs. Leila Rustamova had told us about. To say that Azerbaijan felt betrayed by such an action would be an understatement. On one side, the Soviet government did nothing to calm the things with Armenia. And on the other side, the glorious and protective army were shooting people randomly without any cause. You most probably heard about Thomas de Waal, who wrote The Black January, and how he explained how he also writes about the events of this how tanks would just go over the barricades of cars, shooting at ambulances, shooting at just people in their cars, and just roll over and continue their way. It was the first time when the Soviet army took one of its own cities by force, but not for long. That bloody night, Soviet Moscow lost Azerbaijan, as then after the mass funerals that followed the tragic events, thousands of Communist Party members were just burning their Communist Party tickets publicly in front of everyone and calling for azadlik, for liberty, for independence. And that was really the last drop that completely ended the confidence of Azerbaijan against the Soviet administration. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really riveting, because wanting to know about the general events, but to hear personal stories is always completely gives it another layer of depth. And actually, with that, I'm going to give the floor to Abol, who also has some personal experiences to reveal that sound very fascinating from the glimpse that I've gotten so far.
Thank you. Is it my turn now? Okay, can I share my screen?
Yes, let me see how to do that.
Okay, you have to make me host again.
Okay, sure, 1 second. Let's see, participants.
The three dots on top of my image. You should
I think you're a co-host now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes. Can you all see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Great. I call this presentation a distant witness because I wasn't there. But I was pretty involved with the news of Azerbaijan by the time that these were happening. I want to give you a little background about myself so that you would know where I'm coming from. So I was born in Tabriz in southern Azerbaijan in the midst of Cold War. It was, in fact, when I was born, it was the time for Cuban Missile Crisis. The Azerbaijan as a country was already divided long time ago, but at these times, as I was growing up, the Cold War was going through its harshest times. Two countries, the North and South, were under completely different regime. Iran's Shah was a puppet of West, United States particularly, and the North was obviously under Soviet Union. The contrasts were drastic so far as cultural freedoms were concerned. In Azerbaijan, despite the fact that in the northern Azerbaijan, Soviet Azerbaijan, despite the fact that Soviet regime was a totalitarian regime, the culture was pretty good so far as cultural freedoms were concerned, language freedoms were concerned. In Iran, our language was banned, even though we always spoke Nazari, we never spoke Persian, but the education was forbidden. I grew up between these two dictators, Shah of Iran and Brezhnev. If you look for in Google, I was Googling last night to see if they have a picture together. You would think that they have met sometime. It's really hard to find even a handshake between them. So we were on the border between two Azerbaijan was almost like a Berlin Wall. It was truly, the Aras River was truly our Berlin Wall. I grew up with a lot of nostalgia towards Azerbaijani music, towards Azerbaijani language, but it was a dream for us to even be able to meet with a single Azerbaijani from North, because we were forbidden to travel there. With that background, I grew up, my late teenage years were coincided with the years of revolution in Iran, 1978 and 1979. Tabriz, main capital of Azerbaijan, ancient capital of Azerbaijan, was actually the city where the uprising against the Shah regime started. It was a lot of it was actually nationalistic, anti-Persian sentiments. My own Azerbaijani ethnic feelings were a lot influenced by this revolution. This revolution was not a religious uprising. It was confiscated by Khomeini because of lack of opposition, that Shah had left nothing there. I am mentioning this because this played a role in stamping Northern Azerbaijan's nationalist movement by Gorbachev and the Soviet Union as a religious movement. And therefore, they managed to invade Baku and kill so many people, because the rhetoric was, these are Muslims, anti-Christians, these are Muslim extremists. Soon after Khomeini came to power, I was still in Tabriz. The Azerbaijanis protested against his totalitarian religious dictatorship, and they wanted a secular movement. They started tearing away Khomeini's pictures. They were in the streets again. And this was just another example of how Azerbaijanis thought differently from rest of the Iran, because they were so much more secular. They were not accepting a Muslim Islamic regime. So Tabriz in 1980 was another revolution. Then the Iran-Iraq war started, which was another phase of me in my late teenage years, going through having an honest conversation with myself about my ethnicity. Why would I even defend this forceful war by Khomeini? What is this got to do with me as an Azerbaijani? I then moved to, my diaspora life started right after that. I graduated and moved to England, to Manchester. From 1980 till 1988, I was a student at Manchester University. I was studying textile design and technology. I was also an artist. And these were the times that I started connecting with everything with us about Azerbaijan. There was a bookstore in London. I used to go there regularly, and anything that was about Azerbaijan, I had to purchase, I had to have. I painted some Azerbaijani themes, of Azerbaijani folk themes from those books, from the photographs in those books. And then by some miracle, we had a student from Baku in our university, Mazahir Panahov. He taught me Cyrillic alphabet, and all of a sudden I started reading everything in Azerbaijani, because remember that we did not even educate in our own language. We could not even read the Cyrillic alphabet. So that was the first step towards connecting with Baku, connecting with Soviet Azerbaijan, was learning the alphabet. And then I contacted the Azerbaijani friendship community, Soviet Azerbaijan friendship with other countries. They send me all sorts of books from Baku through mail, and I started learning our literature. I started learning our language, and got really into depth of history of Azerbaijan. I was invited to Baku for the first time in 1987. And as amazing as Baku was, and I have been to Eastern Europe, Baku looked 10 times better than Bulgaria or even Yugoslavia. It was, Soviet Union seemed to be better off in many sense from Eastern Europe. However, they were telling me that these are not good days of Baku. The curfew was still on. People couldn't go out. Armenians had already started their rhetoric about Karabakh independence and not independence, joining Armenia. And waves of Azerbaijani refugees had already started leaving Armenia, their homeland. Azerbaijanis in hundreds of thousands of ethnic Azerbaijanis in Armenia, Western Azerbaijan, were leaving. And this is very important. We have forgotten about this. And I think we have forgotten about our Azerbaijani refugees from Armenia. Nobody is talking about them. They were already 240 Azerbaijanis murdered in Armenia. It's important to mention this because the history that is written by Western media and Soviet media and Russian media and Armenians themselves is that Azerbaijanis started killing Armenians in Sumgayit, and therefore Armenians reacted and kicked Azerbaijanis out. It was completely the opposite. And the Sumgayit event was completely, thanks to Irina for putting those articles out, was completely framed by KGB and by Armenian mob. So in between 1988 to 1989, 214 Azerbaijanis were murdered in Armenia. And the refugees from Armenia were almost forgotten. Nobody was paying attention to them. You know, where were the Russian military when Armenians were killing our population? And history is repeating itself. It's very scary what's going on right now. It's, you know, Russians again are in service of protecting Armenians. They don't care about Azerbaijani refugees or displaced people. They don't put 5,000 Russian soldiers in Armenia to make sure that our people go back to their homes freely. They are all caring about Armenians. It's like the history is repeating itself. So I wanted to, I collected some of these papers that I was reading at the time. You know, The Guardian, Tuesday, March 1, 1988. This is about, you know, stamping Azerbaijanis as Muslims. So all the reports in British paper were, the only source was TASS, Itar TASS, and TASS reported last night, this is March 1, 1988, in Curtis' statement that a group of hooligans have provoked disturbances in the city of Sumgayit in Soviet Azerbaijan. Rampage and violence followed. A response to the mass street demonstrations in Soviet Armenia demanding transfer of Nagorno-Karabakh from Azerbaijan to Armenia. There's absolutely no mention of murders of Azerbaijanis in Armenia. You know, famous face, the Soviet Foreign Ministry spokesman Gennady Gerasimov. This is a day after that. It says infantry detachments are enforcing the second day of curfew in the city of Sumgayit, protecting the Armenian minority there. There was nobody protecting Azerbaijani minority in Armenia. The crisis grows after Azerbaijani say no. So Saturday, March 19, Nagorno-Karabakh Communist Committee votes to join Armenia. It takes a long time, January, March, April, May, June, 3 months until Azerbaijan Communist Party votes no. And the next thing, this goes to Supreme Soviet. Supreme Soviet also voted that Nagorno-Karabakh should stay in Azerbaijan, but mostly they were concerned about Tatarstan, Dagestan, and all those other autonomous regions within the Russia itself. Then we go to 1989, another article in Guardian. This is September 16, 1989. This is really amazing. I had forgotten about this, and I'm so glad that I had kept these pieces of paper. So eventually, in January 1989, Soviet Union did exactly what Russia did today. They took over administration of Nagorno-Karabakh in the name of peacekeepers. So Azerbaijani Prime Minister Mr. Ayaz Talibov, who himself was designated as the Soviet leader of Azerbaijan Communist Party, he himself wanted Russians to leave. So he criticized Kremlin Commission administrating the disputed province, Nagorno-Karabakh, and they were there until since 1989. Other speakers, and these are the speakers of the Azerbaijani parliament, of the Soviet Azerbaijani parliament, demanded immediate dissolution of the commission. This is the Soviet Commission ruling Nagorno-Karabakh by Russia, and restoration of full Azerbaijani authority there. You know, one thing, history repeats itself in very weird ways. So a nation's struggle for independence, this is the turning point. This was a turning point for Azerbaijan. It was a turning point for me, for my own life, because I decided that I need to become a reporter. My education was nothing about broadcasting. 1989, November 9, Berlin Wall came down. Celebrations everywhere. Break this wall down, Ronald Reagan said, Mr. Gorbachev. And then once it was broken, it was nothing but celebration. Gorbachev was completely glorified. The trust in Gorbachev by Western media and Western leaders, quite honestly, was they had built such a trust in Gorbachev. He could do anything now after he allowed the Berlin Wall come down. So December 31, I'm sorry, I become very emotional every time I talk about this. December 31, our Berlin Wall came down. Azerbaijanis on both sides of Aras tore off all the barricades. They were finally together. We had a reunion. This was our Day of Solidarity, and we still celebrate it as the Day of Solidarity. But our truth is completely misrepresented. There were no celebrations about these. These were Muslim fanatics who wanted to join Iranian regime and become part of Iran. On the Iranian side, the mullahs were very scared. They were worried that they are going to import communism or some sort of Azerbaijani independence. So why was it that when it came to us, there were no celebrations? This is Chicago Tribune, Thursday, January 18. The violence in Soviet Azerbaijan threatens to spread to Iran's northwestern provinces. which have a history of turbulence and opposition to the fundamentalist regime in Tehran. They're reporting as if, okay, so, you know, this is accurate. Azerbaijanis in Iran have always been in opposition to the fundamentalist regime in Tehran. But the way they're reporting this, it's almost like the Middle Eastern security is in danger, that they are even concerned that a regime like Iran, that's anti-Western, completely terrorist regime in the world, it may possibly be threatened. This is how it is reflected. Nationalists in Soviet Azerbaijan are demonstrating the establishment of a greater Azerbaijan, which will bring about 20 million Azerbaijanis on both sides of the border together in an independent oil-rich state. You know, they're not reporting these as, oh, wonderful, Eastern and Western German are unified. They're reporting this as a big danger to the whole geography and politics of the region. So it goes on, and these reports that we started now, we are in January 3rd. So these are articles by Baltimore Sun and Guardian about the you know, what happened in this Solidarity Day of removing the borders between Nakhchivan and Iranian Azerbaijan. So they relate this to religious freedom. They kind of imagine this event in their own mind, these Western reporters, as this is due to lack of number of mosques in former Soviet, that Muslims want more Islam, which it was nothing like what was happening. So in Guardian, in a kind of chaotic repetition of the breaching of the Berlin Wall, tens of thousands have camped on the border for several days, demanding access to other side. Their patience broke on Sunday. This is the 31st. Yards of border fencings were ripped down. Initial Soviet press reports accused hooligans of being drunk and drugged. So are they good Muslims or are they drunks? You know, make your mind up. But Izvestia, in the first political analysis of the demonstrations, said Azerbaijanis wanted to link up with the Turkish-speaking minority in northern Iran. Well, no kidding. And then Chicago Tribune, they call Azerbaijanis savages. Savagery marks Soviet ethnic fighting. So this is all about Sumgait events. We know how they were reflected. We know how up until now it was stamped as, you know, Azerbaijanis are murderers. And really, like, the world has not found out about the facts. And all these were excuses to invade Baku. January 19, Moscow declared state of emergency, moved troops. Soviet officials used the ethnic tensions as a pretext to suppress a growing nationalist movement. Everything was planned to arrive at this point. All the KGB plans in Sumgait, in Baku, was just to get here and make sure that Azerbaijan does not become independent. These are courtesy of Radio Liberty that I've worked for. Their photographs were really amazing. And one thing that I want to mention, it's not just Radio Liberty. We had amazing heroes at the time. A lot of them photographers who managed to take pictures, because The city was completely cut off. The TV station was blown out. Azerbaijan has absolutely no connection with outside. At the time, we couldn't contact with Baku. I called Moscow, and through someone in Moscow connected, it was like two lines connections, you know, holding the phones against one another. I managed to talk to Bakhtiar Vahabzadeh, late Bakhtiar Vahabzadeh, who was, when I was a resident poets, who was one of the first people who actually burned his Communist Party passport. And he gave us some information. I passed it on to Radio Liberty at the time. And the rest of them are just some slides that taken a day after or 2 days after. This was going on for days and days and days. This photo on the right is really amazing. You have Lenin's statue is up there, and this is happening under Lenin's eyes. What was really heroic and amazing was that people did not stop. People were not scared, and they came out. This funeral had about 500,000 attendees, and the tanks were still there. They were there for another, God knows, a whole month, I believe, because you know, after the martyrs, lane was filled up with these flowers, and all these people came out. The soldiers were still there. It got to a point where they started pulling them out because now they were worried about the Russian soldiers' families' lives in Baku. So they started moving them out, but not all of them. Instead, they brought more KGB, high, you know, special agents, and they started taking people. You know, they came and knocked your door, just like at the time of Stalin. They just knocked people's doors and pulled them out, and some of them just disappeared. There was no justification. There were no courts. They just came and took people out of their rooms, you know, because they were associated with the National Front or just any whisper about someone. You know, people did not have room to put their dead. They were putting their dead in the balconies, and the soldiers were still there. This is January 30th. So 10 days after, they have special KGB troops in the streets. This is a little kid, you know, whose window was broken. People got killed in their own house. And you know, then this was the end of the Soviet Union. A lot of Western media does not know that Azerbaijan brought Soviet Union down. And this was when, you know, after that funeral, this is when they just burned, people just threw away and burned their party membership cards. And then, you know, the papers, the Russian papers, Gorbachev first, which were also reflected and translated to Western media. Gorbachev first justified his murderous actions by calling us Muslim fundamentalists. Later in 1995, he apologized to Azerbaijanis by stating the declaration of a state of emergency in Baku was the biggest mistake of my political career. No kidding. So the big question, the big elephant in the room these days is how can we trust them now? And you know, we have all these maps in front of us. I don't read Russian very well. I still don't understand what these maps are, but you can see like they go around and draw, you know, tighten tighten the Karabakh against us. No Azerbaijani can possibly walk into Karabakh. So I'm sorry, but Karabakh is not Azerbaijan yet. And they're surrounding Shusha, they're tightening their grab in around that. So this question is really my honest question. I ask myself every day. I love to, hear your opinion about this. This is all from me. Thank you. I'm gonna stop sharing now. And I should make Irina let's see. How do oh, here. Irina, I'm trying now to make you. Is
Oh, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, Ben did it.
okay.
Okay.
Great.
That was really, really excellent. Thank you so much. I wonder if we can get a copy of your presentation afterwards, because this is unique and people really need to know what happened.
Absolutely, I will, definitely.
Yeah, your comments were just that was a really unique perspective. Thank you so much for sharing that, and I'm just so terribly sorry about the experiences everyone has had to go through. But this deserves to be heard, and I have a lot of comments and questions for later. But now I'm going to give the floor to Zaur.
Thank you very much, Irina. Thank you to Mr. Musmar, to Leila, and Abol to giving your testimony, and Maria also. It was very exciting to hear all the details. Well, I didn't subscribe for make my presentation because it's we're living in January 2021, very difficult thing here in France. Who's also living in France like me, because we're in front of a third lockdown, probably beginning from February 1st. So, and trying to very busy anyway. I'm personally occupied with administrative issue of one of our compatriot, which have to change what we call the statute to begin work in France with full rights. But maybe linking with what happened between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the issue was somehow postponed, and she found it herself without a permit to stay, and employer not terminated but suspended her working contract. So as I'm specialist in foreigners law, I have to deal with this, to giving her advice, redacting the mails, special administrative mails, to make a pressure on administrative body to give paper. Now it's on the way. I think they will give her deliver a permit to stay, but it shows again how it's difficult to work and live in France, especially in this period. She personally told me that came into administrative body, she was asked what country were you from, and as telling Azerbaijan, the answer was oui. Oh yes, you are from Azerbaijan. So well, about 20 January, I wanted to testimony because I lived that period in Baku from over 2 years, because we moved from Armenia in May 1988. So I was in my process of integration, as I wrote in my article in Musulman de France about my recollections about Armenia, because my first language speaking in my childhood was Armenian. With Russian also, I was working in Russian school. And then in 11 years and 6 months later, I have to live with my family, with my grandmother, my mother, my father, and my brother. My father came back to Yerevan until December, because he was a journalist of Soviet Turkmenistan, his own other newspaper. So, whosoever from you lived my articles, they knows what I'm talking. But my integration to Azerbaijani society was difficult, and it was a specter all my life, probably 35 years for all of us. For Maria from your childhood, but me from that day, first in February 88, I heard this phrase in Yerevan saying, we want a Karabakh. Until now, it's also specter of a Karabakh. And in Azerbaijan was what I found in 88. And I don't know if someone of you mentioned in the presentations that we have to take into account that Azerbaijani society was sleeping literally and dormant, as we say in French, by social Soviet propaganda. And as I told in my interview about that, saying that was the fate, like as Maria told, that everything happened in the best of in the Soviet countries, in the Soviet world, and in Armenia also was happening. Everything was happening very well. So when I came to Baku and beginning told what's happening in Armenia, and by that time we was in a known that we didn't know that there was 217 Azerbaijani killed in Armenia, but we heard some informations. So as a kid of 11 and 6 months, I was asked about what's happening in Armenia. So I was told about the demonstrators, manifestations. I was beaten several times in school. Was forced to say Karabakh is Armenia, refused and beaten again. And I have just a cicatrice on my shoulder because was beaten with some bones with a metallic thing on it. So I had that evidence on my body. But when I told about all of that, Azerbaijani was Baku. Unfortunately, Baku people in my class comrades was telling, "Oh no, it's not impossible. It's impossible. We're friends. We're brothers with Armenians." And was another saying me, even was unfortunately, and it was very different from a level of each kid was from a level of family. More it was highest in the level of Communist Party or some interest economic and more rich family. More they was neutral and pro-Russian. For example, wouldn't say name, but it was a girl in my class. I was invited to take a tea one day and talking about Karabakh. She told, "Oh, maybe we can give them, and that will gain peace, etc." So it was what's that kind of propaganda very deep in Azerbaijan society. Another comrade was saying we have a common culture. So that kind of thing we're talking today about stealing Azerbaijani culture, stealing Azerbaijani history, and attempting to cheat on Azerbaijan even literature and some outstanding musical also was a problem several years ago, about Sari Galin, and all of you heard about that scandal when Armenian
And dances too.
yeah,
And
dances
dances
too.
too.
So she can testimony because Mary is expert in dancing, so she's specialist. So it was a scandal with Sarah Galin, which is Azerbaijani music, which found itself in Armenian national folk, and Armenian tried to well. But in that time, I found that Azerbaijan is, and it was very difficult in school. Many Armenian, some Armenian comrades was, as I told in my article, saying that their parents in Nagorno-Karabakh doing the bombs, preparing the bombs openly to me. Armenian professors, teachers in school was trying to make me a pressure. It was just an example. One day he told me, explaining something on a border, listen to me, Mr. Refugee, and all of you Azerbaijanis. So I was immediately reporting that at home. My parents made some protestation. He was told by director, and the next time in the class, he just wanted to make me pressure, wanting me I would on rectortation, saying, "If as am I told you that you are a refugee?" And he goes, "Yes, you told me I'm a refugee, and I'm not accepting this." So that's kind of clashes happening. So from 1998, that during these 2 years, in process of my integration, and at the same time, I was learning Azeri because I have to learn Azeri from beginning, from zero. But observing what's happening in a country, it gradually the specter of Karabakh was growing. It was a manifestation all the summer of '88 and '89, and Soviet power was fluctuating. I remember that first summer in Baku in 1988 when we came first. I was living because was trying to exchange our apartment because we have to leave all from Armenia. Because I was staying in my aunt's house, and it was the summer night over. I can find now the date because all is in internet, but it was Supreme Soviet ruling a special meeting about the Karabakh, and it was probably 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. We didn't sleep. We just was gripping on TV at the end because we was waiting what will Gorbachev will say. It was Armenians talking about again genocide, all that thing that Karabakh have to be attached to Armenia, and finally was at 4 o'clock in the morning. Soviet Supreme ruled that Karabakh will stay within Azerbaijan, and then we turn off the TV and go to sleep. So it was permanently specter that Soviet government may make this change, and especially we'll talk about 20 January. I think maybe without that sacrifice and life sacrifice, that maybe something like that could happen, and what's irreversible, because Armenians now told this was constitutional within Soviet Union, so so it's happened, and now it's part of Armenia. But it didn't happen that way, and that because of that manifestation in Baku, that pressure, and the Popular Front was created originally, of course, for maybe purpose of democracy. Many articles about that, but then it was emancipated from the body created Popular Front, and gradually in 1989, the first time then the troops entered in Azerbaijan, in Armenia, but first time it's happened in a good way, because Soviet soldiers was, celebrated, and people gave him to food, to drink, the bread as a hospitality. And even someone told me that Mullah was reading Quran to protect Soviet troops over the tank. So that kind of things happened in 1998 and 89. But the year from the end of 89 to going to 1999, it was a very crucial year, because what happened, and I was living every day in my school in Baku. It was always all our talks were, and my father, who passed away 23, 4 years ago, he told once that what's happening with this conflict, that all is dominated with Nagorno-Karabakh. All our meetings, weddings, burying something, majlis, as we call it, and also marriages, all is about this thing about Nagorno-Karabakh, about the conflict, about what's happened, about information, and usually people were thinking BBC has said, or someone was listening Voice of America, which was forbidden yet, but even in my family was, my father was having radio trying to say what goes America, Voice of America told us, but it was only true information. So at the end, by the end of 1990, in 99, 89, and beginning first days of January, what's happened in Baku, what I witnesses, that we observed that Soviet power, Soviet party gradually lost the power. It was from day to day. It just just that we say that it's very popular now saying we are people for Germans, how they succeed to tear down this wall and make a reunification. But it was something the same procedure. The people just stop execute the party's order on all levels. It was factories of bread. It was buses, railways, airport. People just stop executing parties' orders, and I think by that date, the last day before Soviet invasion, the party completely lost the power in Baku. And the specter was also that if that was not happened, they probably could rule a decision to retouch again. We have to check now what's exactly what was planned, what decision was in the preparation, but something was in the air that if we don't resist now, that will happen, and they will attach Karabakh to Armenia. So what that night, especially that night of 19th January, was not sleeping. Me too, and it was we was not sleeping because very in the evening time we didn't show the TV. It's not working. So immediately information came that TV was blow up, and of course we understand that it's a diversion. So first was the information that maybe Armenians did that something, maybe Armenian invasion preparing, something will happen. And Popular Front trying to get people together, especially on a place now we call 20 January, but whosoever of you was in Baku knows that It's a former place of 11th Red Army place at the last point when you're getting out from Baku. Okay, now it's called 20th January Square. It's a round place. In fact, it's on the road from leaving Baku to the Absheron Peninsula. So what happened in that particular place, that people was making some closing the roads because the Soviet army should invade from that side, and many people was killed there because tank entered by that way. So that night we was hearing, me personally, the machine guns walking because it was detonation everywhere. And my family home is in the Baku center. It's the most center of Baku. There's another center in a city just next to Heydar Aliyev, former Lenin Palace building. You know, the huge palace which now using for celebrations or official things and music. So Heydar Aliyev Center in a center of Baku, and our building is just next, and school also. My school is just next to the street, and Bibul, it's a center. And even on the center of city, we was hearing some maybe it's pieces of bullets was just jumping on roofs around the buildings around. So parents told us don't to be close the windows. We was in an interior of apartment because if bullet can pass, and I had an idea to get out. My mother, it's scandal, didn't allow me to go. My father left very early because he was as a functionary and worker of political journalist in a communist newspaper, and they had to make a meeting. Though what happened in this night in Baku, but in very morning, very early, I think it was 7 o'clock, I escaped from my home. Was maybe unconscious, but I did it. I take what it was literally cold, but I walked till the sea, till the government building. It's the same what you saw in the picture was a burial of people ceremony was organized, and I saw all over the building Soviet troops. And maybe I was lucky because and was another people came to see and was accusing them, saying they murders, but I no of chance because they could kill us in that moment. That was when I came back a couple of hours after at home. My mother was catastrophic, saying was very crying while you lived at home because she was understanding that something bad happened. And several hours after my father came back and told the Soviets invaded Baku, there's a lot of dead, and it was information about that. It was really a lot of dead. Of course, fortunately, we didn't count that because the first impression was thousands of deaths, something history repeating itself like in 1918 with March events in Baku. And the days after, and what's happened in that night, and probably I don't know if Frank or Abrul or Leila told about that. My father was in a known because of his position in a communist party. The fleet, Caspian fleet, Caspian trade fleet, the huge tankers, Azeri tankers that was in a bay of Baku. What they did, they opened it, the soul signal. So was only thing, that's the way Americans probably they was spying by satellites, but that's the way world knew what's happening in Baku because it was a external courage of the captains because they broke the seal, they violated internal rules and trade of from Soviets because they could accused of hot treason and condemned, but they opened a soul signal, and we know in Azerbaijan that it was kind of 4 o'clock in the morning. American president was Reagan at the time, right? He called Gorbachev saying what's happening in Baku, and then they stopped. And what happened, what I learned in the morning, that the troops I saw and the new soldiers I saw in the early morning was not the soldiers of assault. They was exchanged. Okay, there was young Soviet guys from Krasnodar saying they don't understand what they did, and also they said that they heard that their comrade had been killed, what was of course not true, but the truth will change. And the days after, when TV began worked, We of course, listening Voice of America, we learned several facts that some bodies was disappearing because there are still bodies missing of some people killed. That we have officially number of dead, but I think none of them have been found. And it was over the day saying there was some dead bodies that they disappeared because Russians, Soviets take them because they had a special woundings by prohibited arms, especially 545 caliber of Kalashnikov, which is forbidden to use. And there was several days because it was a negotiation to getting back some bodies. And I think not all of them have been handled by Soviets. The TV began works and next days, and it's happening. The most outstanding thing. My father also. I was accompanying my father the next day. I think to his redaction, and I was not participating but listening what the discussion, and was a unanimous proposal to reject Communist Party membership. My father was on one of the speakers saying we have to renounce, and think that communist newspaper was the morning that changed the name of newspaper. Said it was only a couple of days because after they changed it was instead of communist they put the name Sahar, which is morning. And but after of course they changed, and people who left Communist Party after was forced to not make a vax, I'll say the famous party books, membership books was put in a safe, special safe, and they was just virtual members of Communist Party for a year. So what I was witnessing that was, and but it's happened, of course, and there was a famous address of I think what Bakhtiar Bakhtiyar Ranar. He told it was fascist party, and it was the first time someone in a view, very known personality, other personality, was saying that he was a fascist party and he didn't want. It was a lot of courage, and of course, Hidar Aliyev, former Azerbaijani president in residence in Moscow, was extremely courage from his part because a Soviet journalist came from all over the world to asking him. He was ill that time, he was after infarctus. He was weak, as we call now. He was recovering from his illness, but he was extremely courage to tell all the world that what's happening. It was just. Of course, he couldn't denounce like we did in Baku Communist Party, Gorbachev, because it was a totalitarian system. He could face repression, even him and his position, but he was extremely courage. So in that following days, we learned all that about blowing TV center, about that bodies of people disappeared, about the Communist Party defection. But from the years after what's happening, I think, and we knew many things about Popular Front's activity always that night, especially Ektibar Mamedov, his famous interview saying he had a gun with him and he could take, I think it was a Palinishka, no Russian representative, Soviet representative, saying he was idea to take Palinishka in hostages. Well, I think he was someone responsible for his declarations. But the point is that for many years afterwards, in Azerbaijan, we was looking for responsibility, political responsibility. Of course, it was also carried courageous from the part of Elmira Gafarova, which was a very Soviet supreme, announcing that Azerbaijan didn't allow central government to enter the troops, declare emergency situation and enter troops in Baku. It was a very, very, very strong declaration. But regarding political history and searching the political responsibility, we know that Vazirov, who was the first secretary of party, was exfiltrated by KGB to Moscow. And many years after I saw his interview, he saying he admitted all responsibility, and he was saying that people put on me all responsible. I am only responsible. The point is that Mutalibov came on power immediately after. So he was that events prohibited to Mutalibov, and the responsibility of all actors at that moment, he was fluctuating. So for many years, the responsible cheated was Mutalibov, Vazirov, and also some of Russian officials. But the years after, we know that today, I don't think Vazirov have been pardoned, or I mean, there's no case He was no trial on his case, but he was coming, I think, allowed to come to Baku as Ham of his father or something died from family. So Azerbaijan allowed, government allowed him to come to bury his relatives. Mutalibov also, for years, he was in that kind of opposition, considered Russian politician, pro-Russian politician. So he was put an accusation, and now he completely changed. But he didn't was convicted nor persecuted. So he stayed like he's facing his responsibility in front of history. So what's happened with that people, and of course, Russian responsible, Gorbachev, Yazov, and Palenichka, they stayed, but they either not been not convicted, neither convicted, not persecuted. Ekibar Mamedov faced the detention, provisional detention in Lefortovo prison, and afterwards wrote a book, but he was relaxé, like we call in French, not even prosecuted by Soviets. So what I wanted to say is that in perpetrators and organizer of that massacres in Baku, no one was prosecuted and convicted. What happened afterwards, we knew that many Armenian officers was in that assault troops, and that's a characteristic of against of organized murder and genocide of people. But it's anyway, it's imprescriptible, as we call. There's no deadline for prosecuting that people. But maybe one day we will face again these events from new point of view and prosecute that people. Anyway, I'm, whosoever of you knowing me, I'm trying to be extremely objective toward our history and toward events of past century and relations and the war with Armenians. I think in relations with 20th January, one day we have to also reply to the question, what role played Popular Front in that event, because all many things was very good documented. For example, we know that Gorbachev called Aliyev on that night and saying that Popular Front defeated Communist Party, and the Azerbaijanis has just defeated Communist Party, and there's no communist power in Baku, and asking him to intervene. Of course, Aliyev told him, no, as I remember, that he can't intervene. They have to accept Azerbaijani people's rule and stop the playing with Karabakh. But it was not the way Gorbachev intended to do. And then in 95, it's very easy in 5 years, 7 years ago, saying, oh, his regret, it was his mistake. But in that time, the situation was that maybe it was also part of irresponsibility of the people, I mean, Popular Front, because when you putting the people on the streets, you have to face, also understand the consequences. So maybe they didn't, maybe there was another thing, the year before that happened in Georgia, remember that events of 9th April, right? Yeah, the year before 1989, exactly. And was a lot of discussed even in Siezd, what we call the Congress of Communist Party, on deputies of people was supreme power in Soviet Union by the Gorbachev reforms, substantial reforms. I remember it was very difficult, hard to Soviet power, because people was talking everything, the deputies about that was visionating video and testimonies of the Soviet people killed 90 years old grandmother, old woman, Georgian. So almost, and we probably didn't understand, didn't think that may repeat again. I remember one good article was written in a Soviet press. I think it was Argumenta. In fact, it was very good words there, saying that the regime, which is keep itself all the knives of the machine gun knives, couldn't last for a long time. And what's happened in a year and a half, who was independent, and today, if we qualify politically what's happening, I think the 135 victims, Azerbaijani victims, if that time was the people that paid their lives went Nagorno-Karabakh to give it to Armenia. Voilà. what I will tell. And thank you. If you have questions, I will be ready to reply. Anyway, if anyone have another comments, I will be very pleased to listen.
Thank you so much for your experiences and for sharing your experiences. I am so terribly sorry about all of this. It's just horrible, and this is the sort of personal stories that are not known by people in general, by the Western audiences. These sort of experiences are reduced to talking points from lobby groups in some articles during heated conflicts, and people just don't understand that there is a reality for human beings outside these political talking points. And it's very important to publicize this, to share it, for people to hear individuals talking about it, not politicians, not interested parties, but just regular people who had to live through all of this. And actually, I would like to let others have an opportunity to ask questions, and then I have some comments about a lot of this from my perspective. So if anyone wants to chime in and ask or say something, please, the floor is yours.
I don't have actually any questions. Just wanted to comment that the irony of about all this with Gorbachev is that a few months after he received the Nobel Prize for Peace for his role in peaceful dissolution of the USSR, it's like it was not peaceful, as we know. So for us, it was. I remember talking to my parents about that, and the echoes that we would have about this in our societies, that people were just not happy. I mean, I'm putting it mildly, of course, but people were not very happy hearing about this, and knowing that this was just a big lie, how all this happened, how the Soviet government tried to, put the cap on the forming of the independence movement in Azerbaijan, and how it tried to choke it with blood. And then they got just, as Zaur said, no one was persecuted, and not only no one was persecuted, but then people even got prizes for doing this peacefully. That's all.
By the way, if somebody is watching this on Facebook Live, you can email your comments or questions to my email, and I'll read them. My email is sicat222@gmail.com. That's sicat222@gmail.com. So anyone who is watching this can send in whatever you want, and I'll share it with the speakers, or address it myself as it allows. I actually wanted to address the issue of information warfare because a lot of the presentations touched on it in one way or another. We saw how the newspaper coverage from the 80s was trying to play both sides, saying, we saw The Guardian, which is kind of the Communist Party outlet in the United Kingdom, saying Soviet Muslims are rebelling. And it's a very general comment, given that it was actually a very specific country that was having issues. And, the Soviet Union had many different Muslim communities from different backgrounds, but it kind of made it seem like a war of a clash of religious civilizations based on, if you just read the title of that article. And it's very interesting because now The Guardian is again covering this and other issues, trying to play both sides. On the one hand, when you have really radicalized communities, they try to underplay them and claim that these are the real voices of the Muslim people. On the other hand, when you have a genuine issue in some part of the world, they kind of don't like to cover it, and they intervene almost in the way the issue is being handled politically by taking sides, which is not what journalists should be doing. They don't cover. They should be breaking the news, not making them. So it's interesting where they stood with respect to the Iranian aspect, because it did not, that particular article, as I noticed, did not directly touch on the Iranian issue, but at the same time, by it played into Khamenei's, into the hands of the Ayatollahs. It played into the hands of the Iranian regime, because it created the situation where they could say, well, those are, we are the moderates. We are peacefully exporting our revolution through other means, and these guys are.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you. I was trying to make that point.
Mhm. And I was wondering how they could possibly, on the one hand, making this huge commentary about Muslims being radicalized. On the other hand, this supposedly anti-religious newspaper was playing to the most theocratic regime on the planet. And there was what was the logic? Because at that point in time, the Soviet Union was not openly aligned with Iran. They've had their complicated relationships, but it was not an open friendship at that particular period in time. So I'm trying to figure out what exactly was the play of these pro-communist media outlets, why they were, what was the division that they were exploiting here. I mean, we see this pattern between Iran and the Soviet Union and Russia going back to the 1920s, with this British outlets kind of facilitating this back and forth, and it ends up, people, whole groups of people being stuck in the middle. And I kind of wanted to see what you thought about that.
That's a very good point. You're going a little deeper than I did. My impression was that their source was Itar, and a lot of these were things that TASS was saying. These were official lines of the Communist Party at the time of Gorbachev to tell Westerners that, look, we have to tame these Muslims who want to break their borders with Iran, who want to establish Islamic Republic here. So it was, to me, that was that exactly, Itartas was just completely repeating the Soviet press without having good connections, good reporters on the ground. But I mean, that may be a very simple way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Essentially, basically, the Soviet Union and Iran have divided up this territory according to their geopolitical interests. And even though they had conflicting interests on many issues, from the Caspian energy issue to territorial, to access to the Gulf, they at the same time had the shared need to oppress whoever was on the way in order to control whatever the territories they did end up controlling on their own. So that was the same issue from the very beginning of the Pahlavi dynasty, essentially making that compromise, to what we're actually seeing today, with a lot of the Moscow Iran back and forth in various areas of the world. They have their tensions. At the same time, they have to work together to some extent, if only in terms of oppressing anyone else who would benefit from either or both of them withdrawing. So I
Yeah,
was.
don't forget that Soviet Union fully supported Khomeini. And something really interesting happened. The left is pro-Soviet, so we had anti-Soviet leftist and organization, and we had pro-Soviet Westist organization. After Khomeini got the strength, and he was comfortable being the new leader in Iran, he started getting rid of all the pro-Soviet people too. A lot of them actually escaped to Baku. Now, once they saw what was happening in Baku, and how they realized how the Soviet Union exactly was, it was not the utopia they were thinking. A lot of them actually joined the ranks of National Front in Azerbaijan. And some of them were very active in the independence movement. So I'm talking about Southern Azerbaijanis who escaped Khomeini and went to Baku. I did not meet any of them in person. I was too young at the time. And even when I went to Baku, I was still a college kid. I did not meet people that I wanted to meet. There were limitations as where I could move in Baku myself too. But I found out afterwards that a lot of them were actually vital in doing speeches, writing speeches for the National Front. And I also agree with Zaur that Azerbaijani National Front played two opposite roles. Sometimes they were actually preventing people not to attack Armenians. Remember all these 250,000 Azerbaijanis from Armenia. There were hard feelings, and the clashes were sometimes just organic. Some of them were preventing them from doing that, but some other ones that I don't have any evidence, but a lot of people that I've talked to were that they were actually members of National Front, certain figures that were actually KGB's puppets, and they did certain things to make this happen, to make an excuse for Russia for Soviet troops to invade Baku. So it's very complicated. Like Zaur said, there's not been courts. There's nothing been. There's been no closures. There's not been any closures about what happened.
Right, and of course now this whole issue is being brought up again because of the Russian peacekeepers, and there's a lot of concern from all sides actually about their involvement, their interests, whether it's even going to be possible to dislodge them and under what conditions, and what structure can prevent their involvement in the future. I mean, there is, of course, times have changed. Maybe right now because it will be more difficult to do an outright invasion, but at the same time, you can still play territorial gains. Russia can still try to manipulate certain institutions and factions inside Azerbaijan, and nothing should be taken for granted. That's my lesson from any historical situation. Whenever I see something improving, reforming, building for the better, you always have to keep in mind that whoever is against this new direction will always be out there trying to undermine it. But I actually wanted to return to the information aspect of it for a moment, because of the events we saw during this last war and the coverage, and we are seeing media playing an important role, not just in breaking the news but shaping the way the world views events. Back in the 80s, people had limited access. You had your streamlined TV stations. You didn't have broad access to the internet. You had these newspapers with their perspectives. So we saw that the Chicago Tribune actually was hardly better than the Guardian. The Guardian had its own perspective. The Chicago Tribune was really not any less biased in the way it was covering events. And my question is, you have these American Western outlets that are supposed to not be taking active political role, and that was long before the rise of populism and internet and clickbait and all these other things that have made journalism collapse. How do you explain the fact that even back in those days, the media was playing this completely biased political role, and what was the possibility of a pushback? Because the perceptions we have today, okay, some of them are basically people don't pay any attention, then they read something from their favorite organization about humanitarian issues, that it grabs their attention, and they form their opinion based on headlines today. But in some cases, these sentiments have been shaped by decades of particular coverage and information. So where did that come from at that time? Because that clearly carried on further. We can't say that journalism suddenly got ruined, that it was always wonderful and suddenly became horrible. Clearly, we're seeing from this coverage it's not the case.
Uh, you know, that's I was a lot more optimistic about Western journalism actually then than now. Um, it's very evident to me that their biases are religion based, even though even though they may not be churchgoers, even though they may not be you know fundamentalist Christians, but if if you're born, even if you're born into a Muslim family, if you're not practicing, I don't practice Islam. I don't really follow Islam anymore. But I was born into a Muslim family. My father was very religious. It's uh, so I usually have the comfort that that's not about me because I'm not practicing Islam as such. But the bottom line is that they have this preset conception of if you're Muslim, you're guilty, and it's really not. I don't comprehend that. I don't understand that. But it's very clear to me, like with what Macron is saying these days, and leader of a free country, and the way that he approaches international politics with simply, or the way that Trump banned all the Muslims to the United States. I mean, it's just right in front of us. It's what do you expect from a reporter?
Right. At the same time, though, a lot of these, American, particularly newspapers, they were not necessarily speaking even to the heart, to the heartland Americans. A lot of them were big city kind of cosmopolitan, left of center publications. So I'm not sure that bias in their cases was as religiously motivated as anti-religiously motivated in general, and definitely anti-nationalist in the sense that I was getting. So we see that this kind of defense of Soviet and Iranian state integrity, but at the expense of other people. So it, this is the one thing that jumped out at me also during the presentations was this connection, this attempted connection between what was happening in Azerbaijan and what was the Soviet Union doing and the fate of the Middle East. And I kind of wanted to draw on that because I don't believe that subject has been explored in great depth in the Western world, how that topic was being presented, at least, and whether or not there were actually any issues that could have or would have affected the Middle East at large, other than Iran itself. And today, where there's, of course, the world is more globalized, there's international trade between Azerbaijan and Iran and Arab countries and Turkey, of course. And at the same time, these issues have not been fully put to rest, and some parties are kind of trying to make internal national causes into global crisis. So I kind of wanted to hear what actually Leila has to say about that in terms of her the way that issue was being addressed in the archives back then and also today.
I think Layla left.
Oh, okay. In
Yeah,
that case,
Layla left you.
okay. In case anybody else wants to comment or jump in, please go ahead because I'd be very curious to see what people think about that. Frank, if you have anything.
Well, like in concern of conflicts and relating conflicts to religion, I always hesitant in really talking about these subjects. Between Azerbaijan and Iran, eventually problems that it's more to it than being described as religious. So I'm with Abul. I'm not, I consider myself a spiritual guy. I'm not Muslim, but I consider myself a spiritual guy. People normally like relate things to religion whenever there is conflict, and with this kind of conflict between the historical conflict between the territories of Azerbaijan and Iran, it's been used as it's been religious, and yeah, of course, you're gonna have to create an excuse for interfering in areas like that. So people normally they use religion for it. So basically, to be honest with you, I'm not the right person to comment on these things because I really like to stay away from religion's subjects, and I might just leave that to Abul. Maybe he like to comment on that.
I'm kind of like in your situation too. To be honest, it's hard to see it's hard to see religion playing a role when uh, you don't see anybody around yourself who is actually asking for religion freedom. I mean, I've been to Baku so many times. Even in Soviet time, anybody who wanted to go to mosque, they did. If anybody wanted to pray, they did. It was there was less pressure on Muslims in Soviet time than on Christians to practice not to practice their religion. At no times I've seen any uh, such extremist Azerbaijanis that I would be even think twice about. Oh my God, Azerbaijan, the republic is also going to experience what we experienced in Iran. End up with a theological government. Because even in our Azerbaijan, even in southern Azerbaijan, population is very secular, especially now, especially
Mhm.
now. But you mentioned something, Irina, which is absolutely correct. All of these um, were just something that Ayatollah in Iran would have loved to see, and they just gave it to him. Um, Haider Aliyev's regime did struggle with a gang of mullahs that were actually encouraging a regime like Iran in Azerbaijan. They had to fight with them. They had to limit that. The secular regime of Azerbaijan had to be very careful how to deal with some of these religious sentiments. They did exist, but it was limited to certain locations and closer to Iranian border. It's really interesting. Like Astara, for example, is a city divided between south and north. The southern part is almost atheist, and the northern part is under the influence of the Iranian regime, is a lot more religious.
Mhm.
So there's that element too. Like Iranians, including Azerbaijanis, but more Azerbaijanis than Persians in Iran, are so fed up with these mullahs that it's probably the last spot on planet Earth that I would call religious, population-wise.
Mhm.
So it's just like how in the northern Azerbaijan, you couldn't find any communists. All the communists were in Iran.
Right, that makes sense. It's just surprising, like how these information war battles they kind of migrate from one decade to the next. There's a change maybe in slight tone. There's a reshuffle of which publications uh, put out which lies, and there's of course a much greater role for lobbyists today than at the time where you just had reporters basing it on what other reporters wrote or whatever idea. Today we have active involvement of various political actors in propagating this information, but or disinformation, if you wish. But certain points seem to be migrating, and what I would really love to do at one point is actually do a juxtaposition of these headlines in your presentation and some of the comments and photos and what took place during the past war in Western countries and the headlines and the comments from these organizations, lobbyists, publications covering the war, the major ones, and that just to show how you have a completely different situation, different actors, but still the same points being recycled, the same arguments being made. At the time they'd say, oh well, Soviet, Muslims are rebelling, or this strike will destabilize the Middle East. Today they're saying, Sunni jihadists are coming. I mean, really, that was the most laughable piece of propaganda.
And one thing,
That's true.
one thing that I was noticing was just how much English language has changed, and how much how politically incorrect they were 30 years ago. Nobody would write those titles anymore. They just know it's wrong, you know? But they write it more cleverly these days. They don't, the language has changed, the journalistic approach has changed. Thank God we can do a lot more with social media right now, but they still do their job. They still, if they have an agenda, any reporter, any politician, any, if they have an agenda, they do it. They do it more cleverly these days.
Definitely.
From what we saw, whenever people want to insert something, they just take religion and they say, yeah, that's a very good thing. Let's put it, even if it's not there, let's just put it. And if it doesn't stick, we'll just, put and stick it and make everything as possible to stick it. It's horrible.
There is no doubt religion been used in politics for a long time.
Religion is being used in politics. And I remember I read an article in Le Figaro. It's a French article. Le Figaro, it's a French magazine. And there's this organization called SOS Christians of Orient, like SOS Chrétiens d'Orient. And my God, what they wrote there, how, during the recent war, how Armenia, they started saying that, Armenia is the most ancient country on the earth that was Christianized. I mean, that rests to be proved. And even if it was the case, I mean, what has got to do with the fact that Armenia did what it did to Azerbaijan 30 years ago? And, when you were reading this, I remember I contacted my mom, who had a contact with some person in Ganja who actually was linked to this organization. And I'm like, Mom, do they actually read what their people write? They've been to Ganja. They've seen our Christian temples. Myself, I was born Orthodox Russian Christian. Then I gradually, now I'm a Protestant. But we have all kinds of churches, Christian Orthodox, Christian Protestants of different denominations. And everyone is happy, and we never had any fights based on religion. I mean, and I remember I was talking to my mom and I said, how these people, can they just call these SOS d'Orient, Chrétiens d'Orient, Christians of Orient, and ask them to stop writing this just lies?
No, this is not the first time I hear of organizations visiting countries actually being able to see what the situation is on the ground, and then coming back and writing complete lies about that particular situation. Anyway, that's not to say that there are no imperfections anywhere and that there are no legitimate points to be made about anything. But my point is clearly, completely fabricated situations and not just interpretations of certain things or biases or whatever. We are talking about complete fraudulent information. My question has always been, I've been struggling, why would these organizations try to create strife when there is none, or make false allegations when they've had access and were able to visit? Aren't they concerned about their own credibility? The answer is actually it's probably because of fundraising. concerns. It's easier to fundraise on a perception of a conflict, over of a problem, than when you're saying everything is fine and we'd like to build more churches, but otherwise things are doing great and we can't build them with your money anyway because the government is paying for it, so we can't use that money towards that goal. So then they'll say it's a human rights violation issue. That actually brings me to another point. After just to conclude very briefly, I don't want to keep everyone too long, but the issue of nationalism, that's another thing that all these newspapers have tried to discredit, that there is no legitimate reason for nationalist concerns, for concerns about sovereignty. At the time, Azerbaijan was, what are you doing trying to break off from that wonderful Soviet Union?
Yeah.
Trying to protect your territory where people, lived and had property and that was confiscated,
Yeah.
and make it into something, dirty, violent, extreme. And the question is, okay, yes, on the one hand, you're criticizing these guys for doing that, but why are you not criticizing the Soviet Union for taking over territories, for imposing for human rights violations? You can say, okay, both parties can help prevent a conflict, but then why are you looking at only one party as having no legitimate issue here and the other party as being completely 100% legitimate? That's always my question. Even if you say, okay, these are not the measures you should be taking, but what about the other side? Are they 100% innocent and there's nothing wrong with the story? And why are so many people upset?
Exactly. That's the problem. Okay, if you want to talk about the corruption and this and that, let's everyone lay your cards on the table and let's talk about it. But yeah, it's just
because the Soviet Union was not at all corrupt and never had any problems.
Oh no, absolutely. As my mom said, we were the happiest country.
Yeah. So I'm seeing that there is this approach to delegitimize sentiments, popular sentiments, widely supported on whether it's religious ground, ethnic ground, nationalist ground, literally any possible human motivation of social cohesion that you can think of, and only to give the same credit to the other side, no matter where they're coming from, by what means they obtained the supposed authority to begin with. And this is why it's really hard to take these arguments seriously, and this is why it's hard to make, whether it's a human rights NGO or a publication or a politician making these comments, if they come off as completely as saying, well, everybody is, this is completely not a legitimate even motivation, and the other side that's known to have a horrible record, you keep silent about it and you don't mention it. How is anyone really supposed to take that seriously? What credibility are you going to have with any reader? That's just very hard to say. I think that should be called out a lot more often, because I think during the war, a lot of the Azerbaijani response to this has been trying to correct perceptions on the factual basis of what was and what wasn't being alleged. They'll say we're doing terribly, and they'll say, well, okay, guys, look, we've been coexisting for thousands of years, and we have all these diverse communities. So that's a factual, meritorious, substantive correction. But at the same time, I think a lot of this hypocrisy in not acknowledging horrible regimes who have contributed to conflicts, and not calling out the Soviet legacy, not calling out the Iranian involvement, not calling out the issues going on in Armenia itself, forget even with Azerbaijan, but that has created a popular sentiment of that sort that is not peaceful. You can't solve a conflict by only attacking one side, unless that side, engages in some level of terrorism or whatever, and is completely in itself illegitimate, unless you're facing, some jihadist groups fighting each other, or communists and Nazis fighting each other, completely unsympathetic. In most situations, you should be acknowledging that, that there's got to be some level of legitimacy to somebody's concern, and then start asking yourself, well, what did these other people do? Why is everyone so, I have not seen that happen. I have not seen, even after the conflict, that level of acknowledgement of the contributing factors, no exploration of the Soviet legacy that has contributed to these divisions.
Yeah.
And this is what I'd like to see more often, not go beyond political talking points and expose the history. It's not a comfortable history, nobody wants to hear about it. In the US press, I can tell you that whenever we start talking about Soviet Union, anything, nobody wants to hear it. Maybe some specific issues that everyone has agreed on, communists were bad, nuclear weapons, blah blah blah. But other than that, educationally, in terms of ideology, it's not something that was to be confronted because there's been a significant, actually, Soviet influence in the US educational institutions and in the media circles. So this is not a comfortable topic. Nobody wants to discuss it, but it needs to be discussed if we are ever to break through this information warfare. I think this is one of the biggest ways, not to just respond defensively, even with factual good information, but actually go into these events, present individuals, have them write articles, have them appear, send op-eds, appear in whatever forms, make them go on Twitter and share short videos and say, this is my personal experience. You cannot pretend that that millions of people are lying when you pretend you're willfully blind to these facts. This is how you break through to that, by sharing more and more of these individual stories that are eyewitness testimonies and that make history undeniable, and therefore today's reality much more complicated than these talking points pundits would like to make it seem.
Exactly.
That's basically what I'm drawing from listening to all these presentations and hearing all these nuances and understanding that, for me, it's a learning experience. I come from the Soviet Union myself. I'm generally aware of all these methods and these situations, and written about the Soviet Union's involvement in the various ethnic conflicts and creating this. But to me, it's every time it's something new. It's just making it realize exactly how that machine had worked and how they set in motion events that we are unraveling to this day. And this is something that really needs to be understood. It needs to be a lot more written about it in a way that's popularized and not just for a few specialists in a few universities. There's a need for Caucasus related education in American schools. So that's the only way to really break through to the monopoly of narratives, in my opinion. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
just
true.
something to think about.
Just like we have with the Chernobyl, when they try to hide all these things and say that nothing happened, and now thanks goodness it got popularized, and now we hear exactly what was happening. So it's just, I guess, when it comes to politics and religion, it's a very deadly combination of explosive combination. So
Absolutely. And
that's why.
what feeds on creating, perpetuating conflicts. The question is, why are they doing it? Because it pays them. If they, said, oh, well, this is terrible and these guys, no. But the more you side with one party, the more you agitate the other, and you create more conflict instead of resolving it. So that's the reason they feed from these divisions. They feed from conflict, and it's in the media's interest not to cover nuance and not to cover something that would make people think about it and push for more nuanced measures in response. So that's this is what we're trying to fight here with our events, to create this nuance, to explore the history, to explore things in depth and go beyond the headlines. So
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
thank you very much for
you're doing a great
Thank
job.
you.
Yeah, you're doing a great job, definitely. What I think that we are all responsible for bringing people together. It's not that's not happening. I don't think that anybody would ever wake up, say, "Oh, I'm going to kill an Armenian," or "I'm going to kill an Azerbaijan." An average citizen doesn't do that. You don't wake up and go to try to kill someone because you ethnically hate them. All of these atrocities are orchestrated. They're done through gangs. They're done through some underground movements. They're done through KGB. They're done through either governments themselves or certain gangs within those entities. And right now, what is really concerning me is that Russians are taking the role of isolating Azerbaijanis from Armenians. They have drawn this border around what is left of Karabakh, and they're not allowing a single Azerbaijani to walk into that space. They have a corridor that is connecting Armenians. Anybody can come with no Azerbaijani government having no control over who is coming, who is going. They're trying to open even more corridors. And it's exactly what they were doing at the Soviet time too. The nature of Russian government hasn't changed much, unfortunately. They adopted the Soviet hymn as their hymn, and then they added the Tsarist logo to it, another empire's logo. All the intentions of Putin is expanding his empire. And I'm sorry, I just can't trust them. But meanwhile, how much can we do ourselves? When I was going to college, I had Armenian friends, and I heard from them for the first time about Karabakh before I even knew that Armenians want to have. This was like in really early 80s. And I found out that my Armenian friend, had found that out from their church. So their church has played a huge role in ganging them up.
It did, yeah.
We did not go to mosque. I don't know any Azerbaijani going to mosque. I don't think that even good Muslims go to mosque because they pray at home. Mosque plays absolutely no role in provoking your national incentives. So I'm sidetracking. I'm sorry. There's so many other topics to look at. But right now, I think our job is to integrate and bring us together. And now, this situation of Armenian diaspora, as much as they are really polluting the air on daily basis with massive amount of misinformation, I really don't know what we can do about that. Yes, we can retweet, we can answer them back, but it's not a solution.
Well, I think the solution ultimately, first, holding specific actors accountable for deliberately disseminating disinformation to their own people, much less to everybody else. There are identifiable actors who are engaging in that. Second, providing information to the public at large and getting other people to ask questions. So when other people start confronting them, they will be forced to respond or examine their own premises or ask questions of the leadership. If you can't, if right now there's such a concentration of catalysts of disinformation, the issue then is to go outside of that and go to the people they're targeting and make sure that they hear both sides of the story, and understand how this conflict has become a conflict not just of physical territorial claims, but massive propaganda, massive indoctrination because of a political and system and politicians using religious institutions to propagate divisions for specific reasons. There is an incentive not to resolve the conflict. The incentive is financial. When lobbies go, and it's much easier to say we have a grievance, we are a victim, you need to help us because we've been attacked by somebody, and then to say you need to help us because we're trying to build a future together. And then the politician will say, well, why don't you work with your counterpart and raise money together and figure it out? Why do I need to give you money for that? That's basically the issue. There are financial and political incentives to keep the conflict going. So far as those incentives are in place, that there is going to be somebody trying to perpetuate. When there's an opposite incentive to solve the conflict, when you get rewarded for peace building efforts and punished for incitement, that's when the conflict starts getting resolved. We see that with Abraham Accords in the Middle East. There has been literally a switch in incentives by Arab states, not just by Israel or the United States. They switched the incentive system from contributing to too positive and trying to devoid everyone involved in any sort of peace building and limiting interaction with parties that are not counterproductive or going around them and using other means to do what's needed to be done. So in similar situation here, it's not that the Armenians all should be dehumanized and isolated. On the contrary, they should be incentivized to engage positively, but that means holding their leadership accountable for that.
Yes,
true.
exactly. And try to, uncover all these dirty fundraising, because that's what this machine is so huge that it runs so deep that
There
you
should
just
be a positive incentive towards joint fundraising and joint
Exactly.
activities towards peace building. If that is
Exactly.
incentivized and the other one, like victim complex, is desensitized, that's when you make a breakthrough, like making practical deals on specific issues like what we see in the Middle East. Then it's exactly the same idea. People have their own interests, and at some point people will want to do business and make money and not engage in fruitless conflicts that cost them money, lives, and peace. That's it's hard to identify pragmatic actors, but I'm sure there always are, and it's the issue of giving them voice, giving them platforms, giving them incentives, and giving them an opportunity to engage, actively by various countries, Azerbaijan, US, whoever, not just, rather than engaging only with the actors we know to be destabilizing. That's the way I see is a long-term solution for this. Just change the incentive system. So on that note, on that cheerful note, I thank you everyone so much for participating and for staying and for the very interesting discussion. We will be back again very soon next month. If you have any specific topics or issues you'd like us to discuss in the future, please share in the network. Please invite your friends to join us. To feel free to write up your presentations, to share, to submit articles, and get other people who will want to present in the future, even if they're not journalists, but historians, specialists in various areas. Please, they're very welcome to present at future events.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much for participating.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself.
And you as well.